everybody. Happy almost 2026. Can you believe that we've already made it through 2025? I am still over here writing 2024 on dates. But believe it or not, we've made it to the end of the year, and I thought that it would be a fun concept for me to sit down with you guys today and recap for you what my best and worst sellers were at crochet markets in the year of 2025, as well as give you guys some predictions for what I think the 2026 trends are going to be in terms of crochet. If you're new here, hi, my name is Katie, also known as the Celestial Homebody, and I am an amigurumi crochet artist. I take my crochet plushies and sell them at markets, conventions, festivals, all that jazz. So I did quite a handful of events this year, some big, some small, some short, some long, and I have compiled a list for you guys of what my overall best sellers were in terms of patterns. And I'm going to be linking all of the patterns that I mentioned down in the description box. So just hit the read more and then it'll give you links to take you to links if you would like to go and check them out for yourself. And I'm also going to be telling you guys the price in which these sell the best at. So these items that I'm going to talk about are not necessarily the highest quantity selling because some of them are bigger, more extravagant things that I don't market prep a bunch of. But with that being said, I still consider them best sellers because they're things that every single time I make and take to a market, it sells on its first debut. So I can't keep them in stock even though I'm only making one of them at a time, as opposed to something tiny that I bring like 20 of at a time to markets. So let's dive right in. Let's start with a fan favorite that I just launched, I guess you could say, at Indiana Comic-Con, and they flew out of my booth, and that is this free Ribbler pattern, which is a little platypus. And I specifically use the Premier Basic Chenille Brights in the color Caribbean, and it is the perfect Perry the Platypus color. If you're not familiar with Perry, he is a character from the show Phineas and Ferb. And what I do for my platypi is, or platypuses, I actually learned that the scientific multiple of platypus is either platypus or platypods, which I think is a lot more fun than platypuses, because that sounds dirty, you know? Anyways, so I make my platypus in that laying down style, like in the free pattern, but I also make little detachable hats for them, like little fedoras, so that when people come into the booth, they see the platypus. And the amount of times I've heard people say, a platypus, and then they put the little hat on top of its head and then say, Perry the Platypus, it gets people every single time. So I usually put a $12 to $18 price on this, depending on the market. I think that a $15 price on this is pushing it for a standard market. But when I bring these to conventions, I always price up all of my inventory at conventions because the booth fees are exorbitant, multiple times as much as just a standard festival or farmers market or something like that. So we're talking multiple thousands of dollars for the booth fee. So I always up my inventory cost. So I would say for just a standard market, I think that $12 is a perfect price for these with a 6.5 millimeter hook and that Chenille Basics yarn. They come out to be a good size. Like I would say it fits in two hands laying across, plus that little detachable hat on it. I will say that this pattern is one that I modify, because in the free Ribbler pattern, it has you crochet the bill, and then color change to the body, and then do the body, and then decrease, and then color change for the little tail. When I made them like that, they just looked funky to me. So what I do is I make the tails and all of the bills separately first, and then I crochet them into the round as I batch make these guys. For the little hats, I just freehand them. So unfortunately, I don't have a pattern for you for that. But even if you're not doing the blue, like cartoon platypus, I think that just a normal platypus would sell really well. They're just kind of one of those like meme animals, like a sloth or an axolotl. Axolotls I never really bring to market, so I can't say that they're a bestseller for me personally, but I know that they are for a lot of people, specifically with kids because of the game Minecraft. But anyways, I'm getting off topic here. So Platypus is number one. The second bestseller for me, by the way, these are in no particular order in terms of bestsellers. It's just, they're all just in random order. Okay. So the next bestseller for me would be my Nyx the Baby Dragon. This is actually my pattern, and I designed this pattern when I was preparing to vend at a huge, or what I thought would be gigantic, Renaissance festival. And I designed this pattern because I was looking for something that was akin to, I don't know, like a Loaf cat or something like that, where it would be market prep friendly and I could just whip out a bunch of them. It wasn't a pattern that I was getting sick of. It wasn't a pattern that was taking too long for the size that it came out to be. And unfortunately, I tried multiple different dragon patterns and none of them were just like that Goldilocks and the Three Bears perfect. They either took too long or were too small or were too detailed or too complicated or not detailed and complicated enough. So long story short, I put pen to paper and I wrote this little baby dragon pattern. And what I love about making these is that the color combinations are endless. I have never done a Nyx the Dragon in the same color combo. They're also a great opportunity for me to bust out my variegated yarns, because I don't really use variegated yarns that often. And because it's a small enough surface area, I don't feel like it's cumbersome or overwhelming when there's a bunch going on in it, you know? I will also say that everybody who has contacted me about the pattern has told me that it is also a bestseller for them as well. I sell my little Nyx the Dragons for between $12 and $18 depending on the market, but I would honestly say that at $15 to $18 price you can easily get for these little guys, especially if you're using bigger yarn, because similar to the platypus, they come out about the size of two hands put together when they're lengthwise, and typically people are drawn to their favorite colors, so I always recommend having a bunch of different color combos and maybe even doing some inspired by famous dragons. Like I did a Spyro one that is purple with yellow accents, things like that. People are drawn to obviously their favorites, so the more color combos that you have available, the higher of a chance somebody's going to see one that really tickles their fancy. And I sell at least a couple of these at each market that I go to. And speaking of things that every crocheter has, but I will say is a bestseller for me, that would be Loaf cats. Loaf cats, I feel like even though every crocheter has them at their booth, they still just fly out of the box. And I say box because for me, I display them in a little cardboard box that has kittens written across it with the price. A lot of crocheters use the Annie Caraway cat pattern. I believe that's who it's by. That's like the viral one. I honestly freehand my Loaf cats, and I think that they might come out a little bit smaller than that Annie Caraway pattern, but I am content with the size that mine come out to be. I sell them between $15 and $20 depending on the market. Most of the time they're $15, at a convention they're $20, and they sell like hotcakes. I will say that bestsellers for me personally have been tuxedo cats, black and white cats, as well as calico cats. I would say that those are the two highest sellers, but those two I don't make as often. I don't know why. I really like making orange cats using the Burnout Mystical in the color Canyon. That yarn is so pretty and so luxurious to work with. So I just have an abundance of orange cats, but to my knowledge, that is true in nature as well. There's always an abundance of orange cat strays. I've heard it's because they have an attitude, but I don't know. I'm not really a cat person, so I can't speak on that. Every orange cat that I've known, though, they got an attitude. It's also worth noting that for my loaf cats as well as my baby dragons, I offer a little carrying case for them. They're actually just little party favor boxes that I got on Amazon. They are linked on my Amazon storefront if you're interested in what they are. I'm not sure what the dimensions are, but I do remember when I ordered them, I measured the dragon and made sure that they would fit in there, and they do. With some of the dragons that are bigger and a little bit longer, I just fold one of the sides down of the carrier and then just let their little heads stick out, and kids absolutely adore that. With the dragons, I also offer a little adoption certificate where it looks all like medieval, and kids can fill in their name and their dragon's name and all that. Now, I don't know that the adoption certificate and the carrier necessarily makes sales, but it does make them super happy, and therefore it makes me happy when a kid brings up a little dragon or a cat that they want to purchase, and I say, do you want a little carrier for it? And they just light up and they're like, oh my gosh, yes. Actually, at the most recent market that I just did, I had a little girl come back a second time and purchase a second loaf cat just so that she could get a second carrier for it and so that they could be friends, which was adorable. But that was $30 in sales just in two loaf cats at that market. So they are definitely good sellers for me. Another good seller for me along the lines of loaf cats, and also one that I offer carriers with, would be my Loaf unicorn pattern. And this is another pattern that I designed when preparing for the Renaissance Festival because I wanted something that was themed for the Ren Fair that was similar to a loaf cat. So therefore the Loaf unicorn was born. It is a Loso pattern, and these you whip out so fast. So I offer the little carriers with these guys too, and I put between a $12 and $15 price on them. $12 they fly, $15 they still sell well, but it really depends on the market. And I will mention too that I use the Loops and Threads Fluffy Flex yarn. You can no longer get it at Michael's, unfortunately. It was discontinued, but it is it's like a jumbo size yarn, and I use, I believe, an 8mm hook, so my Loaf unicorns come out jumbo. So if you're using normal yarn, normal chenille or blanket yarn, and like a 6mm hook, I would definitely err toward like the $10 to $12 range. But these fly, specifically the ones that I make to resemble the My Little Pony characters. Typically the ones that look like Pinkie Pie, so they have like a light pink body with dark pink curly hair. Those go really quickly, as well as the Rainbow Dash ones go really quickly. That is a purple unicorn body with rainbow chenille curly hair. Those sell almost every time I make them, and the Loaf unicorn is super quick. These take me like 20 minutes to do, so for a $12 price, 20 minutes, that's a lot of bang for my buck in terms of time. So that is another pattern that I recommend, not just because it's mine, but because it is genuinely a bestseller for me. The next thing on my list is a bestseller for, I feel like, everybody, and it is for me as well, and that would be sea turtles. I don't really think I need to talk much about the sea turtles because everybody and your monkey's uncle who sells crochet is going to tell you that sea turtles sell well. I don't know what it is about them. I love them. Like, I'm not even a turtle person, and I honestly kind of hate making sea turtles because it's repetitive for me to have to make all the parts for them. But when it's done, I hold it in my hand and then their little fins flap off the sides of my hands. And I'm just like, I'm in love. This is my child now. And I don't want to sell it. I don't know what kind of a chokehold the sea turtles have on us all, but it's something else. I typically like to get a little fancy with my sea turtles, and I make them strawberry turtles. The fruits sell well, so fruit turtles, or I'll bust out my variegated yarns and do variegated shells. Always look really pretty, or like the Premier Basic Chenille tie-dye. Those look stunning as turtle shells. I have in the past in a couple of holiday themed ones, like I've made a few that look like a pumpkin pie. But anyways, no matter what color or size the turtles are, the sea turtles sell. Speaking of turtles, a different kind of turtle, which would be a tortoise or a little baby land turtle, would be Tofu the turtle. This is an Etsy pattern that is very cheap, and I will say that this is probably one of my best pattern purchases in terms of using it to sell at markets. I make so many Tofu the turtles and they sell phenomenally. I think that people typically prefer sea turtles over the tortoises, but I much prefer to make the tortoises because they're just little baubles for the feet, and it's so nice to not have to make all of the fins. So Tofu the tortoise, very cute little baby turtle, and similar to the sea turtles, you can get fancy with those too and use variegated yarns or make them look like inanimate objects or holiday-fy it, maybe do like a little pumpkin for the shell, or since it's around Christmas time, you could do, I don't know, like a little present on its back or something. They're very modifiable, is that the right word I'm looking for? You get what I mean. You can definitely play with the pattern to make it your own. You don't have to stick to just the vanilla pattern, but the Tofu turtle sells really well for me. The next item that I sell through like hotcakes would be chickens. And I feel like every crocheter is making chickens similar to the Loaf cats. And I know that the Mabel chicken pattern is the really popular, really viral one, and that is typically what I see at Crocheters booth. But the chicken pattern that I use has its little head sticking up, so it gives it a little bit more character and personality, in my opinion. So when people see that, it kind of stands out from the crowd. And I have not done this, but I do think that they might sell even better if you put little wings on them. I know that Robin at Notting Hook Crochet, if you watch her, she had a hard time selling her Mabel chickens until she put wings on them. And when I first started selling crochet, I did the Mabel chicken too, and I did not move any of them. People would kind of be like, oh, that's kind of cute. Like I would do like the little fuzzy on top of the head, and people were more drawn to that. But I think that because they're a very basic shape, they're just kind of like a crescent that you like sew up, people weren't really drawn to them in the way that I thought that they would be. So that is why I think that this chicken pattern stands out more. And so I sell a ton of these, and I actually make some of them in blue to be the blue chicken inspired by the game Stardew Valley. There's fluff flying around all over the place. And depending on the market, I sell more of the blue chickens, like at conventions where there are a lot of nerds like myself. I sell a lot of those blue chickens, and even if they're not wanting a blue chicken, a lot of times they just associate the chicken itself with the game Stardew Valley. I don't know why. Maybe it's something having to do with the shape of it. I don't know why, but a lot of people say Stardew Valley chicken. Maybe I do know why. I usually display them next to Chonimon, which is another Stardew Valley inspired character. So maybe they just assume that they go together, even though they don't necessarily. But I sell my chickens for between $15 and $20. I would say that $15 is like bare minimum, I would not go lower than that because these guys are beefy. They fit into 2 hands. So I would not go lower than 15 just for material and time costs alone, although they will say that they are very quick. But at $18, they sell well. $15, they fly. So normally I don't even mark them that low because I don't have the inventory to keep up with them selling. In terms of colorways, I would say that the white is my overall bestseller. Second, which would honestly probably be the black chicken. And then I embroider little white eyes onto it. I did not expect this year for the black chickens to sell the best. I don't know why, but they do look very cool. So I'm happy that they sell well. I was just thinking that black chickens in real life aren't super common. You know, I think of like the normal just white chicken, ye old backyard chicken, or maybe like a speckled one. Not a lot of black chickens. But then again, do I look like a farm girl to you? What do I know? These next 2 patterns are by a friend of mine and fellow YouTuber, Stacy at Apple Tree Boutique / Stacy Makes. And every single time I make these 2 patterns, they sell. I don't make a ton of them, but these are those things that it's like whenever I do bring them, I don't come home with them. So that first one is Nutmeg the Squirrel. This is a cute little squirrel pattern that works up very quickly. When I have made these in the past, I've actually used the Big Twist, what is it called? Big Twist Plush, Rip Joann's and Big Twist. But the color is called Cardamom, I believe, and it is this like rusty brown color. And I have a fur that I got from Joann's as well that matches it almost identically. So I use that around the tail. I have made a handful of these and I sell at least one at every market, and I have not restocked them in a while. So it is on my to-do list to restock these. I put between a $12 and $15 price on these. I would say the majority of them actually sold at the $15 price. And now again, keep in mind that this yarn that I'm using on these guys is a jumbo weight yarn with like an 8mm hook, so they are big. This is another item where you might want to price it a little bit lower if you're using a 6mm and a smaller blanket yarn. But these little Nutmeg the Squirrels work up very quickly. I want to say like 45 minutes, which to me is quick. I feel like anything under an hour I would consider a quick market make. Maybe it's not very quick, but it's quick. Along those lines, every single time I make a skunk, it also sells. I price these guys for the same price range as the squirrels, and I normally display them together, and they fly like hotcakes. The very first market that I did, which was a little over a year ago now, I had made one of these skunks and I only made one, and I used very, very little yarn on it. I want to say I used Parfait Glitz, so it was sparkly, but that yarn is very small and the skunk only came out like this big. It was so tiny, and then I used the fur on it and I priced it at like $15 because of it didn't take any less time to make, and fur yarn is very expensive, as you probably know. And I remember at that very first market, it was my first lesson in don't overprice things because of size, because the amount of people that came up and picked up that skunk and they wanted it so badly, but then they looked at the price and then set it down because it was so small for such a large price. You know, $15 isn't anything to scoff at when it's an item this size. And it did end up selling on the second night of the 2-day market, so it did go home. But that was a lesson in like people only pay attention to size and don't realize that it takes the same amount of time and a lot of money and materials to make these things. So all of this to say that a $15 price for your skunk I think is fair if it comes out a little bit bigger. Otherwise, I would say $12 is fair. At least for me in my area, that is the price that I charge, and they sell out every single time. Along the line of marsupials, possums are also bestsellers for me. And I actually have not made any possums to stock for markets in a couple of months, but routinely these sell great for me. It could be the area that I'm in because I do live in a very rural area. And most of the time when customers come to buy a possum or they see the possum, almost every time they tell me a story about how them or somebody that they know had a possum recently in their house or their yard or their garage, because they're all over the place here in rural Indiana. So I lump together the possum, the skunk, and the squirrel, and I have one price sign for all of them. I do price the possum just a tad bit higher because they do take a little bit longer, but this pattern that I use is free. So that is great if you are balling on a budget because it's just a free blog pattern and they come out a very decent size for the time that you put into them, which again, similar to the squirrel and the skunk, I would say is about 45 minutes. This next one is another bestseller that I don't make a ton of, but every time I do, it sells, and that is the birthday turtle. So going back to how we were talking about how people just love sea turtles, they're drawn to them, like how the ocean calls Moana. In this case, the ocean, the sea turtles call to the customers. And something that I realized was that it's always somebody's birthday. And the thing about birthdays is that they come year round. So every time I've sold one of these, it has been a gift for somebody else. So the customer will be like, oh my gosh, my best friend or my sister, my mother-in-law loves turtles and her birthday is next week. So these always sell for me. I've done a handful of different color combinations, and on mine, I always use that Fluffy Flex from Michaels, which again, you can't get anymore. But what I love about using those yarns is they're actually right there, right behind me, right there, is that they have little speckles like built into them. So it kind of creates the vibe of funfetti cake. So I love using those yarns, and with those and I believe I use a 7mm hook or an 8mm hook. I can't remember. It's been a hot minute since I've made them, but they come out a very, very good size. I put a $55 price on those and they sell every single time. Another bestseller of mine, you can probably anticipate it being on this list if you are a regular viewer of the channel and of my market vlogs, and that is gummy worms. Little gummy worm fidgets. I actually have a free tutorial here on my YouTube channel that I will link for you in the description box, but these little gummy worms fly. They just fly, especially when I display them in a trolley sour gummy worm bag. I got that bag, I believe, at Sam's Club, and then just emptied out all of the actual gummy worms for it. And then my husband Ryan took them to work for months on end and ate them in his lunch. But I just rinsed out the bag, let it dry, of course, and then I stick all of those crochet gummy worms inside of the bag. I then display the price like on the table right in front of the bag, and so many people come over just to see what is in the bag. They're like, gummy worms? Like, are you selling gummy worms? Here I have all these plushy crochet items, and then they look in the bag and they pull out the little gummy worms, and then I say, you know, they're fidgets and people love them. They sell great. I have sold these for as low as $6, although I would not recommend pricing them that low because they sold so fast for me that I could not keep up production. I have sold them for as high as $12 at convention, but for me personally, a sweet spot is $8 is what I sell my gummy worms for, and they sell phenomenally at that price, and I sell a few of those every market, even if it's a very tiny market. In fact, my last market that I just did was very, very small, and I still sold a couple of gummy worms despite not selling much else. Along the line of food, another bestseller for me is pickles, and specifically when I put them in this pickle jar that used to be a cheese ball container, and if you know, you know. about the cheese balls. But I cleaned out this container. I put a sticker paper that I printed with a little thing that I designed on Canva that says freshly stitched pickles, and then used that sticker paper to stick it to the cheese ball jar and laminated it so that it would be good, you know, for outdoor markets with rain and moisture, things like that. And then I put a little set of Dollar Tree tongs on the side, and so many people come into the booth just to comment on the pickles or to pick up a pickle with the tongs. It's just one of those interactive display things that draws people in. And no, I don't sell as many pickles as people who come and pick up the pickle with the tong, you know, I have in my booth, unfortunately, but I do sell a ton of them. And I'm constantly putting them back on my to prep for market list. And the good news is that they're very quick and very easy to make. So they're easy to whip out while I'm binge watching Netflix or YouTube or something like that. My pickles I sell for $10. Never had an issue selling them at $10. I think that if I were to change the price, it would probably be down to $8. I probably wouldn't go higher than 10 just because they don't take a lot of time and a lot of material. It's also worth noting that I do make some of my pickles with safety eyes, and then I also make some with embroidered eyes, because something about the pickles, parents want to get them for their little kids and babies. So I always make sure to have at least a few with embroidered features instead of the safety eyes. And finally, the last thing on my bestsellers for the year list would be Chonimon. These are little free Instagram patterns by the account Naughty Nat. In fact, I'm going to link her entire account for you in the description box instead of the individual patterns, because she has a plethora of these Chonimon patterns. They're just little spherical balls. It's spherical. There's a little Drake and Josh reference for all you millennials out there. But they are meant to be inspired by Pokemon. For me, the most popular Chonimon would be Snorlax, Gengar, Eevee, and Pikachu, which I feel like if you're familiar with Pokemon, you could probably guess that those would be the most popular. Those I feel like are just the most popular Pokemon all around, and lucky for me, those are some of the easiest to make. All of these little Chonimon patterns really range in time, how much time they take, because some of them are literally just a ball with like one little accessory, like a Jigglypuff just has like the little curl. Other than that, it's just a ball. It does have the little ears too. Same with like Gengar and Snorlax. There's not much to them, but then the Eevee, for example, you have the fur collar around it, you have the ears, you have the tail, so there's a little bit more work into it. I would say they take between 25 minutes to an hour, and something that I really struggled with this year when selling these, because they were selling so well and I was constantly restocking them and making new ones, is what do I price these? Because I wanted to just be able to put them all into like a tub and then put one sign for Chonimon, instead of individually pricing them and like pricing some of the Pokemon more than others, because I felt like that was weird. But I'm like, they all take a different amount of time, and 20 minutes and 60 minutes is a large gap. So I ultimately put a $15 price on mine, and I don't have a problem selling them at $15, although I will say that some of the Pokemon species I have had for a hot minute, but those 4 that I mentioned earlier sell every single time at that $15 range. I would not go lower than $10 on these, and I would definitely not go higher than like $18 with how big they come out, but that's just me personally. So Chonimon, definitely a good thing to have at your booth because they're popular, they're quick, they don't take a ton of material, and I like that there's a bunch of different ones so that if you get tired and burnt out making one specific one, you can just make a different one. So they were all of my market bestsellers for 2025, but I want to take just a minute to talk about my worst sellers. There's not very many things on this list at all because every market is different. And sometimes things that would be a bestseller for me at one market would be a worse seller at the other one, or vice versa. But I came up with a couple of things that I see other crochet artists selling like hotcakes. And then for whatever reason, they just don't sell for me. Even if I put a crazy low price on them, they still don't sell for me. So the first one for me would be, I call them poppets, the little cable and canvas fidgets that like pop up. Like they've got the mushroom one and the squid one. I made some of those for my very first market over a year ago, and they are still with me today. And I think I have a $5 price on them, and they still don't sell at that price. Nobody wants them, and I don't understand why. They do get quite a bit of attention, and I have a sign that says like, pull my top, I'm a fidget, and people like play with it, but then they just throw it down and walk away. So I don't know what the deal is. It is one of the cheapest items at my booth, and they just don't sell. So the poppets is one. The next thing that doesn't really sell well for me and sells well for other people is the critters on swings. And I don't know why. I don't know if it's just the area that I'm in. To my knowledge, Indiana does not have any laws against hanging something from your rearview mirror. When I looked into it, it said what most states have, which is just don't hang anything that obstructs your view. So that is like up for judgment, and to my knowledge, it's up to the police officer if you get pulled over if they consider it obstructing or not. But it's not like my state has a law where you can't hang things from your rearview mirror, because people have stuff hanging here all the time. So that was my only theory as to why they don't sell well. But I explained to people, like, I don't have them advertised as car swings. I just call them critters on swings. And I tell people, like, I have one hanging from like the shelf above my desk right now, right over there. And you can hang them anywhere. You could wear them as a necklace if you got a small enough neck, you know. They don't have to go necessarily on your rearview mirror, but they still just don't sell well for me, which is a major bummer because they're quick and they sell well for other people. And kind of along that line, mini birds do not sell well for me, and I have not made them in a while because the first couple of markets that I brought them to, they did not sell well. I put, I believe, a $9 price on them, but they were good size. They were like, I don't know, yay big. And I remember making 2 of each. So I made like 2 eagles, 2 cockatoos, 2 flamingos, 2 penguins, etc. And I actually just sold the last eagle at this past event that I did. And that has been with me since my very first market. And I think I put a $5 price on it, and it finally sold. Oh, hallelujah, because I was so ready to see it gone. Even though it didn't take up a lot of space in the body bags, still packing and unpacking it for multiple markets, it was just getting on my nerves, you know. So mini birds is another one that did not sell well for me. And the last thing on this list is a little bit of a cop-out for worst sellers, but that would be holiday items just in general. I feel like I don't really put a lot of time and money and resources into prepping holiday items because I was burned before last year when I did that, and then I was stuck with Halloween items until this year that I'm still trying to get rid of. So I don't make a ton of these things, but even the small amount that I have made this year has not sold well. And it's really unfortunate because I love making holiday stuff. I think that it makes your booth look festive and like hip because, you know, you're hip with it. You got the seasonal stuff, but maybe just this day and age where people are like more, I don't know, people aren't really buying holiday decor anymore, I feel like anyways. Although that being said, every year like Home Goods and Michaels and everybody comes out with some new collection of stuff that takes the internet by a storm and everybody is all over. But in terms of handmade goods, in my experience, holiday stuff does not sell well, and it's really a bummer. So those were all of my worst sellers for 2025. And now I thought that it would be fun to talk about what my predictions were for crochet, specifically like plushy amigurumi crochet and selling at markets moving forward in 2026. So my first prediction that I think is going to be big is going to be build your own little stations at booths. I think that the whole concept of like Build-A-Bear is something that a couple crochet artists and vendors I have seen done, but not everybody does it yet. And I think that 2026 is going to be the year where we're going to see those little stations where choose your critter, choose your accessory, choose your second accessory, choose your little carrier for it, and decorate the carrier maybe if you want to go above and beyond, I guess. But that I predict being really big by the end of 2026. Heck, I might even be doing that because it is something that I have had in the back of my mind for many months now that I wanted to prepare and I just haven't. So build your own things is number one. My second prediction of things that are going to be big is going to be K-pop demon hunters. And that we've already seen here at the back half of 2025 of the three girls and specifically Derpy the tiger and also the little crow thing. I don't even know the crow's name, but it's got all the eyes. I think that those characters are not going anywhere anytime soon, especially with K-pop Demon Hunters 2 on the horizon. I believe that they're already in production. Doubt it's going to come out this year, but you know, like once we start hitting a lull in that franchise, there's going to be a second one. So I think that K-pop Demon Hunters is going to have us all in a chokehold for a hot minute, which is ironic considering the entire plot of the movie is about them having us in a chokehold, fans in a chokehold. The next thing that I think is going to be very popular within the crochet community is one that I've actually already kind of jumped on, and that is modular patterns. So you buy a pattern that's kind of like a pattern pack where it's like a 3-in-1 or a 6-in-1 where it's like a base pattern, but then it has different things that you can change about it. So for example, I have my Nessie and Lassie. It is a Loch Ness Monster / dinosaur pattern in one where it's modular. So you can decide the tail, you can decide the legs if you want it to be like the sea monster style or the dinosaur style. You can decide like the back accents. I think that we're going to be seeing more modular patterns, and I really hope that this trend comes to pass because I think that that is a great way both for pattern designers to make money, but also for consumers to save money without having to buy a bunch of different patterns. Like, for example, if you buy my Nessie and Lassie, you don't need to buy a sea monster pattern and also a dinosaur pattern. They're one and the same, so you save money. You know what I'm saying? So hopefully modular patterns take off the way that I think that they're going to. The next trend that I think that we're going to see a lot of, both in patterns coming out as well as what people are selling, is going to be mythical creatures. We kind of dipped our toe into that this year. I feel like crochet dragons were humongous this year. And in years past, they weren't as big and there weren't as many creators coming out with their own dragon patterns and modifications for like flower dragons and mushroom dragons and holiday dragons. So I think that moving into 2026, we're going to continue to see that trend and expand on it a little bit with some more mythical creatures. So Mothman, Bigfoot, Yetis, unicorns, and more mermaids, and just made up creatures that creators make up, like goblins and whatnot. I personally am very much so here for all of the cryptids and mythical creatures. I personally prefer to make those over just standard animals, woodland forest animals. I think it's because I can get more creative with the colors, whereas when you're doing realistic animals, you're kind of sticking with the neutrals most of the time. So I really like being able to bust out the pastels or the neons and use those on those more obscure creatures, and they're just a little bit more unique too. And then finally, my last prediction for 2026, and to be honest with you guys, this is more just wishful thinking than anything, and that is going to be that my Snuggle Sprites collection really takes off. I long to be one of those pattern creators that so many people know by name, and I am working so hard on building this collection, and by the end of the year, I want to have like 100 different critters out, as well as many Snuggle Sprite patterns out. I've got a good start on this, and I will link for you in the description box my entire collection of Snuggle Sprites patterns on my website. They're also available individually on my Etsy as well, but it's just easy on my website for you to see all of them in one place. So yeah, I really hope that these patterns take off. Just that thought of being able to make money doing what I love and pattern writing is so exciting to me. So my prediction and wish for 2026 is that Snuggle Sprites really take off and the collection grows and everybody's making them and selling them at markets and giving them to people for baby showers, because they're specifically designed for like little kids and babies and all of that jazz. So that is all I have for you today, my friends. My 2025 best and worst sellers and my 2026 predictions. I'm interested. Leave a comment down below what your best sellers for 2025 were if you sell at markets. And if you don't sell your crochet at markets, let me know in the comments, what do you want to see more of moving into 2026, or something that you want to see less of in the crochet community? For me, that would be AI and pattern stealing in the crochet community. Can we please have less of that in 2026, please? Also, while you're down there, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join the Homebody community, where we share tips and tricks videos just like this, market vlogs, pattern roundups, showing you what I made throughout the week. And I would be more than happy to have you here on the channel. And before I say goodbye, endless thanks to the members in the Cosmic Couch Club. You guys keep this little galaxy spinning. Thank you all so much for hanging out with me today on this video. I wish you the very happiest of New Year's, and I hope to see you on the next one. Bye-bye.